Welcome, dear viewer, to your new life. Congratulations, you've just woken up as a perfectly ordinary Roman citizen in the year 150 CE, during what historians laughingly call the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, right? Because nothing says peace quite like the sound of your upstairs neighbor's chamber pot crashing through rotten floorboards at 3 in the morning, followed by a stream of creative Latin curses that would make a gladiator blush. Take a deep breath through your nose. Don't. That cocktail of sewage, rotting fish, burning charcoal, human desperation, and whatever died in the alley last week isn't morning mist. That's just Tuesday in the greatest city the world has ever known. You're living in what the Romans optimistically call an insular apartment building that reaches toward the heavens like a prayer and leans toward the street like a drunk patrician after a wine-soaked dinner party. These architectural marvels house roughly 90% of Rome's population, because apparently the Romans believed that if you're going to live in a death trap, you might as well have company. You're on the 4th floor, because of course you are. The wealthy live on the ground floor where the walls are thick, the ceilings high, and the chances of fiery death marginally lower, maybe only a 30% chance on any given Tuesday. You're up here where the walls are made of wood, daub, sheer optimism, and whatever bargain basement construction materials the landlord could acquire without asking too many questions about their origin or structural integrity. Augustus, bless his imperial heart, tried to regulate these buildings by limiting their height to 70 Roman feet, about 21 meters of pure vertical anxiety. Nero, after the Great Fire of 64 CE, reminded everyone why wooden buildings and oil lamps don't mix well, lowered that to 60 feet. But as you'll discover, Roman building codes were more like Roman building suggestions, honored about as faithfully as marriage vows at a Dionysian festival. You're building houses about 40 families in what can charitably be called apartments, and more accurately described as vertical coffins. The smell will tip you off to who died in the night, it always does. Romans have developed an impressive catalogue of scents to distinguish between natural death, plague, murder, and fell down. The stairs because the landlord used sawdust instead of mortar. It's like wine tasting, but for corpses. But let's talk about your morning routine, shall we? First order of business, not dying. This requires checking that your floor hasn't collapsed overnight. There's a 15% chance it has, according to statistics, that Romans don't keep because they'd be too depressing to carve in stone. You'll also want to verify that fire hasn't consumed the building below you, and that the person coughing in the room next door isn't spraying the latest plague across your shared wall, which is about as thick as a Roman senator's conscience. These aren't paranoid thoughts, these are Tuesday morning survival protocols. Roman insulae collapse with such regularity that wealthy Romans like Marcus Licinius Crassus made fortunes buying up the rubble-strewn lots and rebuilding with the same corner-cutting techniques that caused the original collapse. It's like a real estate pyramid scheme, except the pyramids keep falling down and killing people. Your room is approximately the size of a modern walk-in closet, which would be generous if it weren't for the fact that you share it with your spouse. 3 children, 2 chickens, a goat named Marcus after the emperor, because Romans have a sense of humor, and whatever rats have decided your grain stores look appetizing. The furniture consists of a bed that's more conceptual than functional, a chest for your belongings, both of them, and a small shrine to your household gods, who you're beginning to suspect have abandoned you for better real estate in the Subura. The windows, if you can call them that, are openings in the wall covered with wooden shutters that do nothing to keep out the cold, the noise, or the smell of your neighbor's cooking, which today appears to be some sort of fish sauce soup that smells like low tide mixed with regret. Romans don't believe in glass windows, for the poor glass is for patricians and public buildings, not for people who rent by the month and pay in copper coins. Water is a luxury you can't afford to pipe to the 4th floor, so you'll be making the treacherous journey downstairs and outside to the nearest public fountain. This involves navigating a staircase that was clearly designed by someone who believed in natural selection and thought the gene pool needed a little chlorine. The Romans, in their infinite wisdom, built these stairs narrow, steep, and dimly lit, because apparently making it easy to escape a burning building was for cowards and people who lacked character. Each step creaks with the authority of wood that's been supporting too much weight for too long. The handrail, when there is one, feels like it might come away in your hand, taking you with it in a graceful arc toward the ground floor. Romans, consider this character building. Survivors, consider it attempted murder by architecture. Outside, Rome greets you with all the subtlety of a gladiator's net to the face. The streets are narrow, deliberately so, to provide shade in summer and to make cart traffic a living nightmare year-round. Cart traffic that, by imperial decree, is banned during daylight hours, because someone finally realized that mixing pedestrians with ox-drawn vehicles and spaces, the width of a sidewalk, was producing more casualties than a minor Gallic uprising. So, instead, you get the delightful soundtrack of wheels on stone echoing through the city all night long. The grinding of iron-rimmed wheels on basalt blocks creates a symphony that would make modern city dwellers weep with nostalgia for the gentle purr of traffic jams. Sleep, like privacy and regular meals, is a privilege of the wealthy who can afford houses with thick walls and servants to buffer them from the sounds of civilization. The fountain you're approaching serves roughly 300 people, which means the water pressure is whatever the gods feel like blessing you with today. The aqueduct system, for all its engineering magnificence, wasn't designed with the assumption that Rome would house 1 million people. The Romans built for a modest city-state and ended up with a sprawling metropolis that consumed resources like a barbarian army with expense accounts. The line ahead of you includes a cross-section of Rome's finest, slaves carrying amphorae for their masters, their shoulders already bearing the permanent slouch of people who spend their lives hauling heavy things for other people's convenience. Mothers with children clinging to their strollers, trying to prevent their offspring from drinking from puddles that might contain more diseases than a military hospital. Elderly citizens who remember when the Republic was still pretending to care about the common people and when bread didn't require a government subsidy to be affordable. There's also the occasional foreigner trying to blend in while clearly having no idea what they've gotten themselves into. You can spot them by their clean clothes, their confused expressions, and their tendency to stand too close to people while speaking in languages that sound like they're clearing their throats with enthusiasm. Romans have learned to give foreigners a wide berth not out of prejudice, but because newcomers often carry diseases that Romans haven't built immunity to yet. You're all united by one common experience, the bone-deep certainty that someone is going to cut in line, and that person will probably be better armed than you are. Roman social hierarchy is enforced through a complex system of knowing your place, and your place is behind anyone who owns more slaves than you do. Let's discuss your breakfast, shall we? If you're feeling optimistic and your purse is heavier than usual, meaning you have more than 3 coins and none of them are counterfeit, you might afford a piece of yesterday's bread. The Romans are great believers in bread, so much so that the government provides a daily grain dole to prevent the citizens from remembering that rioting is always an option, and that pitchforks are remarkably effective against silk togas. This government bread, distributed through a complex bureaucracy that employs more people than some provinces, is about as nutritious as sawdust and only slightly more flavorful. It's made from grain that has traveled thousands of miles, been stored in warehouses where rats have contributed their own seasoning, and processed by bakers who consider hygiene a luxury for people who can afford to be picky about their food. Sources: if you're fortunate enough to have a few coins pervs, you found some in a dead man's purse. Or maybe you sold something you actually owned. You might supplement this feast with olives that have seen better centuries. A bit of cheese that may or may not be entirely cheese, and garum Rome's contribution to culinary horror. It's a fish sauce made from fermented fish guts that the Romans put on everything, and which tastes exactly like what you'd expect from a condiment, made by people who thought subtle flavor was a personal weakness. Garum is the ketchup of the ancient world. If ketchup were made by people who believed that if something smells like death, it must be healthy. Romans export this delicacy throughout the empire, which probably explains why so many provinces eventually rebelled. Nothing says we come in peace quite like forcing conquered peoples to eat fermented fish paste. Most mornings, though, you'll be making do with something the Romans cheerfully call pulse or porridge, made from whatever grain didn't get claimed by rats, mixed with water that you hope came from the fountain and not the Tiber River. The Tiber, for reference, is where the city dumps its sewage, its dead, its regrets, and occasionally its emperors when they become inconvenient. Drinking from it is inadvisable unless you enjoy the company of intestinal parasites and want to personally experience every disease known to Mediterranean civilization. Pulse has the consistency of wallpaper paste and the flavor of disappointment. Wealthy plebeians might dress theirs up with a bit of oil or some vegetables that haven't completely rotted yet. Poor plebeians eat it plain and try to think about something else while swallowing. Slaves don't get pulse, they get whatever's left over after the pulse has been distributed, which is usually just the memory of grain and a profound sense of gratitude for still being alive. Your breakfast entertainment comes courtesy of your neighbors, who are engaged in the Roman tradition of airing their grievances at volumes that suggest they believe the gods might be hard of hearing. The couple downstairs is arguing about money specifically, the lack thereof, and whose fault it is that they're one coin away from destitution. Their debate includes detailed genealogical assessments of each other's character, creative suggestions about what various gods might do to their respective anatomy, and frequent references to activities that would make a prostitute charge extra. The family upstairs is arguing about the smell coming from the family next to them, who may or may not have remembered to dispose of their grandmother after she passed last week. Romans have elaborate funeral traditions, but they also have economic realities, and sometimes the realities win. The resulting olfactory evidence provides entertainment for the entire building and attracts flies that serve as an informal calendar system. Privacy in an insula is a concept as foreign as indoor plumbing for the poor, which is to say, it doesn't exist outside the fevered imagination of architects who have never actually lived in their own buildings. The walls between apartments are thin enough that you can follow the plot of your neighbor's marriage, their business dealings, their bathroom habits, their religious practices, their children's education, and their opinions about the emperor's latest tax policy. Romans, it turns out, are not quiet people. They believe in expressing themselves with the passion of actors performing for the back row of the theatre of Marcellus. Every conversation is a public performance. Every argument is a dramatic monologue, and every domestic activity is accompanied by a soundtrack that would make modern noise ordinances seem like gentle suggestions. This means you're intimately familiar with the domestic disputes of 40 families, the sleeping patterns of 60 children, the digestive schedules of what feels like half the empire, and the mating rituals of various barnyard animals that your neighbors keep as livestock, pets, or emergency food supplies. Romans did not invent the concept of noise pollution, but they perfected it with a dedication they usually reserved for conquering barbarian tribes and building roads to nowhere. Now, let's address the matter of your career prospects. You're a plebeian, a free citizen with all the rights that entails, which is to say, you have the right to work yourself to death for the enrichment of others, the privilege of complaining about it in taverns before staggering home to your 4th floor paradise, and the opportunity to participate in democratic institutions that are about as democratic as gladiatorial games. The Roman economy runs on a simple principle: slavery for the tasks that require no skill, and wage labor for the tasks that require just enough skill to make slavery impractical, but not enough skill to make wage labor profitable. You fall into that sweet spot where you're too valuable to own outright, but not valuable enough to treat well. It's like being a rental personal, the responsibility, none of the job security. If you're a craftsman, you work for a guild that regulates your prices, your methods, your hours, your materials, your customers, your apprentices, and probably your thoughts, if they could figure out how to tax those. Guilds exist to ensure quality, which means ensuring that no one makes too much money or gets too creative with their techniques. Innovation is suspicious, suggests that the traditional ways might not be perfect, which is practically treasonous. If you're a laborer, you work for whoever's willing to pay you in something other than promises and IOUs. This might be hauling, building materials for yet another triumph arch, carrying messages for people who are too important to walk, or cleaning up after public events that generate mess in quantities that would impress modern festival organizers. Romans love their public spectacles, and spectacles generate garbage in direct proportion to their magnificence. If you're a merchant, you're competing with merchants who have slaves to do their hauling, their bookkeeping, their customer service, and their thinking, which gives them certain advantages in the marketplace. Free merchants survive by being faster, smarter, or more desperate than their slave-owning competition. Mostly they succeed by being more desperate. The Romans have mastered the art of economic inequality with the same efficiency they brought to road building and genocide. The wealthy own everything worth owning, including most of the people worth owning. They live in houses with courtyards, private baths, decorated walls, and enough space to forget that other people exist. Their biggest daily concern is deciding which of their properties to visit and which slaves to take with them. The middle class, and yes, Romans invented that too. Along with the anxiety that comes with it, lives in constant fear of sliding down into the working class. They own small businesses, rent decent apartments on the 2nd or 3rd floors, and maintain careful relationships with patrons who might help them climb higher or prevent them from falling lower. Their biggest daily concern is maintaining their status without spending more money than they have, which is a mathematical impossibility that somehow works through creative accounting and regular prayers to gods who specialize in financial miracles. Meanwhile, the working class lives in constant fear of sliding down into slavery, which can happen through debt, criminal conviction, military defeat, or just being in the wrong place when the wrong person needs money. Romans don't have bankruptcy laws, they have slavery laws, which are much more efficient for creditors and much less convenient for debtors. Slavery, you see, isn't based on race or ethnicity in Rome. It's based on the simple principle that whoever loses a war becomes property, supplemented by the equally simple principle that whoever owes money becomes property if they can't pay it back. This means your neighbors might include former kings, former priests, former merchants, former soldiers, and former free citizens who made the mistake of borrowing money from people who charge interest rates that would make modern loan sharks blush with embarrassment. The Romans are wonderfully egalitarian when it comes to stripping people of their humanity. They don't care if you were nobility in Gaul or royalty in Egypt once you're a slave. Your furniture that happens to be able to talk and occasionally needs feeding. This democratic approach to oppression is one of Rome's great innovations, along with concrete, the arch, and professional sports as public distraction. Your job, assuming you have one today, because employment in Rome is about as stable as the foundations of your building, requires you to venture into the streets of the greatest city in the world. These streets were not designed for the million people currently using them. They were designed for the 100,000 people who lived here back when Rome was still pretending to be a modest city-state with reasonable ambitions and a healthy respect for republican values. The result is that every journey across the city becomes an exercise in human choreography that would impress the dancers at Nero's court if they weren't all too busy trying not to get trampled by the crowd. You'll be sharing these streets with slaves, carrying palanquins for masters who refuse to walk anywhere that might involve contact with common people. Merchants driving carts loaded with anything that can be sold for a profit, including things that probably shouldn't be sold at all. Animals being herded to market by people who clearly learned their herding techniques from military strategists. Children who should probably be in school if school were a thing the Romans cared about for. Anyone below senatorial rank. And the occasional drunk who started celebrating Bacchus a little too early in the day, or possibly last week. The traffic flows according to principles that would baffle modern urban planners, and apparently baffled Roman urban planners too, since they gave up trying to make sense of it and just banned cart traffic during daylight hours. This solution worked about as well as you'd expect, which is to say, not at all. But it did create the illusion that someone was in charge and cared about the welfare of pedestrians. Navigation requires local knowledge passed down through generations of Romans who learned the hard way that some streets dead end into private property guarded by slaves, with clubs and bad attitudes. Some streets flood when the Tiber gets enthusiastic about seasonal changes. Some streets are controlled by gangs who charge tolls for passage and provide protection services that you didn't know you needed. And some streets are best avoided unless you enjoy the company of citizens who've chosen to supplement their income through creative interpretations of property law. The smell of the streets deserves its own epic poem, because it will be accompanying you everywhere you go, like a malodorous personal deity. Rome is a city that has embraced the full spectrum of human aromas, from the exotic spices in the market's pepper from India, cinnamon from the Far East, garum from Helt, the less exotic results of 1 million people trying to live together, without adequate sanitation or any real understanding of what causes disease. Every street corner features a collection point for urine, which the Romans harvest for use in their textile industry. Yes, they use human urine to clean their clothes, because apparently the Romans believed that if something smells terrible, it must be good for you. This philosophy also explains their medicine, their entertainment, their foreign policy, and their approach to urban planning. Now that you've successfully navigated the urban obstacle course that Romans call streets and managed to collect water, without being trampled, robbed, or conscripted into someone's private army, it's time to address one of the more pressing concerns of Roman daily life: personal hygiene, or, as the Romans call it, not smelling worse than the Tiber on a hot day. The Romans, you see, have developed quite the reputation for cleanliness. They've built an empire partly on the promise that Roman civilization includes regular bathing, which distinguishes them from barbarians who apparently believe that personal odor is a form of warfare. What they don't advertise in their imperial propaganda is exactly how that bathing works. When you're not wealthy enough to own your own private bath, welcome to the Therma, the public baths that serve as the social, cultural, and hygienic center of Roman life. These magnificent buildings represent some of Rome's finest architecture, complete with marble floors, painted walls, soaring ceilings, and enough space to house a small army, which is appropriate because on any given afternoon, they're packed with what feels like half the city's population, all of them naked, sweaty, and ready to socialize. The Roman approach to bathing is delightfully communal. Privacy, like toilet paper and affordable housing, is not a Roman concept. Everyone bathes together, rich and poor, old and young, citizens and slaves, clean and not so clean. It's democracy in action. If democracy involved a lot more nudity and significantly fewer voting rights, your bathing experience begins in the apoditerium, the changing room, where you'll disrobe and entrust your belongings to the supervision of strangers, slaves, and thieves. Roman bathing attire consists of whatever you're wearing when you arrive, minus everything you're wearing when you arrive. The Romans haven't invented the concept of swimwear, possibly because they're too busy inventing crucifixion and professional sports. Storage for your possessions is provided in niches carved into the walls, protected by the honor system and whatever. Gods specialize in preventing theft. Spoiler alert, these gods are not particularly effective. Romans consider losing your belongings at the baths a normal part of the experience, like getting wet or contracting mysterious rashes from the communal facilities. The bathing process follows a prescribed ritual that moves you through rooms of increasing temperature, like a human sacrifice being slowly cooked for the gods' dining pleasure. You begin in the frigidarium, the cold room with a cold plunge pool that Romans used to shock their systems into remembering they're still alive. The water is refreshing in the way that being thrown into a mountain stream in winter is refreshing, invigorating, and potentially fatal. From there, you progress to the tepidarium, the warm room, where you can gradually adjust to the idea of heat, without immediately cooking like a gladiator under the noon sun. This is where Romans socialize, conduct business, and engage in the complex social negotiations that determine who gets to use the massage tables and who gets to wait in line with the unwashed masses. The caldarium, the hot room, represents the pinnacle of Roman bathing luxury. Here, the floors are heated by a sophisticated system called the hypocaust, which circulates hot air under the floors and through the walls. The effect is like being inside a well-appointed oven. If ovens were designed for human occupancy and social interaction rather than bread making, the temperature in the caldarium reaches levels that would make a modern sauna operator nervous about liability issues. Romans, however, consider this health promoting. They believe that sweating purifies the body, cleanses the soul, and demonstrates their superiority over barbarians who prefer to remain dirty and disease-ridden. Personal cleansing in the Roman Style involves implements that would horrify modern spogger. Romans don't use soap, they use olive oil and something called a strigil, which is a curved metal scraper designed to remove the oil along with several layers of skin, accumulated dirt, and possibly some muscle tissue if you're particularly enthusiastic about hygiene. The process involves slathering yourself with oil like you're preparing to be roasted, then scraping it off with a strigil in long, firm strokes that remove everything that isn't permanently attached. Romans considered this invigorating. Medical professionals would consider it a form of controlled injury. The social aspect of the baths cannot be overstated. This is where Romans conduct business deals, arrange marriages, plan political campaigns, gossip about their neighbors, and engage in the sort of networking that would make modern business professionals weep with envy. Nothing says trust me with your money quite like being naked in a hot room together. Apparently, conversations in the baths cover everything from the latest gladiatorial matches to the emperor's newest taxes, from the quality of this year's grain shipment to whose wife was seen with whose slave in compromising circumstances. Romans have elevated gossip to an art form, and the baths provide the perfect venue for sharing information that would get you crucified if you said it in public while clothed. What the Romans don't discuss quite as openly is the disease transmission, the potential of their communal bathing system. The same water that's cleansing your body has recently cleansed everyone else's body, along with whatever ailments, parasites, and infections they brought with them. Roman bath water is changed infrequently, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, sometimes when the smell becomes unbearable even by Roman standards. Sharing bath water with hundreds of other people creates opportunities for disease transmission. That would fascinate modern epidemiologists and terrify modern health inspectors. Romans contract skin conditions, intestinal parasites, and mysterious ailments that spread through the population like philosophical ideas, but with more itching and fewer insights into the nature of existence. But let's talk about Roman toilets, shall we? Because no discussion of Roman hygiene would be complete without addressing the most fundamental of human needs and the Roman approach to managing them communally. Roman public latrines are marvels of engineering and social interaction, built over running water that carries waste away to the Tiber where it becomes someone else's problem. These facilities accommodate multiple users simultaneously. Privacy is not a design consideration. Roman toilets are more like park benches with strategic holes, arranged to facilitate conversation while you conduct your business. The seating arrangement consists of marble or stone benches with circular holes, positioned close enough together that you can easily discuss the weather, politics, or your digestive health with your neighbors. Romans consider this sociable. Modern people would consider this a nightmare scenario designed by someone who fundamentally misunderstood the concept of personal space. Hygiene after using these facilities involves the famous Tursorium, a sea sponge attached to a wooden stick that serves as the Roman equivalent of toilet paper. What makes this particularly interesting is that these sponges are communal. Everyone shares them. Used ones are rinsed in a bucket of salt water and vinegar, then passed along to the next user like a baton in a relay race nobody wants to participate in. The shared sponge system represents Roman efficiency at its most horrifying. Why should everyone bring their own sponge when the community can provide a shared resource? The answer, of course, is disease transmission on a scale that would impress modern biowarfare specialists. Dysentery, parasites, and various unidentified ailments spread through the population via these communal hygiene implements like gossip through a marketplace. Romans, who can afford it, bring their own sponges, carry them in special cases, and guard them jealously like precious family heirlooms. Poor Romans use whatever's available and hope the gods of digestive health are feeling merciful that day. Speaking of digestive health, let's discuss what you're actually putting into your body on a daily basis. Roman cuisine, at least for the average plebeian, is an exercise in creative nutrition and wishful thinking. Your main meal synod takes place in the early afternoon, when work ends and before the day gets too hot to think about food. Roman timing is based on practical considerations. You work in the morning when it's cool, you eat when you're hungry, and you sleep when it's dark, because oil for lamps costs money that you need for other essentials. Like not starving, the centerpiece of plebeian cuisine is bread, provided by the government through a complex distribution system that employs more bureaucrats than some provinces have soldiers. This bread is made from wheat that has traveled hundreds of miles, been stored in warehouses where it mingled with rat droppings and weevils, and processed by bakers who consider hygiene a luxury for people who can afford to be picky. Government. Bread has the texture of adobe and the nutritional value of sawdust with aspirations. It's supplemented by whatever you can afford to buy, steal, or find lying around that hasn't been claimed by someone better armed than you are. Garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything, deserves special mention as both a culinary achievement and a testament to human adaptability. Made from fish guts, salt, and thyme, garum undergoes a fermentation process that produces a condiment with the aroma of low tide. Mixed with industrial accident and the flavor of what you'd expect from fermented fish organs, Romans believe garum enhances the flavor of food. What it actually does is overpower the taste of whatever you're trying to eat, which is often a blessing given the quality of ingredients available to the average citizen. If your porridge tastes like disappointment and your bread has the consistency of roof tiles, garum, at least, provides a consistent flavor profile, even if that profile suggests something died in your mouth. Vegetables are seasonal, expensive, and often past their prime by the time they reach your table. Romans eat whatever's available: cabbage that's more yellow than green, onions that have seen better months, and fruit that's been handled by so many people it's developed its own ecosystem. Meat is a luxury that most plebeians experience on religious holidays, family celebrations, and occasions when someone dies and leaves behind livestock that needs to be consumed before it spoils. When you do eat meat, it's often of dubious origin and uncertain freshness, seasoned heavily with garum to mask any flavors that suggest you should probably be feeding it to your enemies instead of yourself. But Romans don't just eat for sustenance, eat for entertainment. And when we talk about Roman entertainment, we need to discuss the crown jewel of imperial spectacle, the Colosseum, where bread meets circuses in the most literal and violent way possible. The Colosseum represents everything Romans love about civilization: engineering excellence, social hierarchy, mass entertainment, and creative violence. It's a marvel of architecture that can seat 50,000 people and provide them with a clear view of elaborate methods for ending human life. A day at the Colosseum follows a carefully orchestrated schedule designed to satisfy every level of Roman bloodlust. The morning session features Venetians' animal hunts, where exotic creatures imported from the far reaches of the empire are hunted, tortured, and killed by professional beast fighters called Romans find it entertaining to watch lions fight bears, elephants fight rhinoceros, and humans fight anything with teeth and claws. The variety of animals available for slaughter reflects the scope of Roman conquest: bears from Germania, lions from Africa, crocodiles from Egypt, and tigers from Asia, all of them transported hundreds of miles so Romans can watch them die in creative ways while eating snacks and placing bets on which animal will kill the other first. The midday entertainment consists of public executions. Not criminals condemned to death are killed in ways designed to educate, entertain, and terrify the population. Romans have elevated execution to performance art, often staging elaborate recreations of mythological scenes where the condemned criminal plays the role of the victim who dies horribly at the end. These executions serve multiple purposes. They dispose of criminals. They provide moral instruction about the consequences of breaking Roman law. And they filled the time between the morning animal shows and the afternoon gladiatorial contests. Romans consider this efficient programming. The creativity involved in these executions would impress modern horror movie directors. Criminals are burned alive while playing the role of Hercules, torn apart by wild animals while reenacting the death of Orpheus, or crucified while portraying whatever mythological figure the crowd requests. It's dinner theater for people whose idea of entertainment involves significantly more actual death. The afternoon brings the main event, gladiatorial combat. These fights between trained professionals represent the pinnacle of Roman entertainment, combining athletic skill, dramatic storytelling, and the very real possibility that someone will die in interesting ways. Gladiators are slaves, criminals, and volunteers who have chosen to risk their lives for the possibility of fame, money, and social advancement. They train in special schools, follow strict diets, and develop fighting techniques that maximize entertainment value while providing reasonable chances of survival. Romans prefer their gladiators to live long enough to develop followings and generate betting interest. The fights themselves are choreographed, spectacles that combine genuine combat with theatrical elements. Gladiators fight in different styles: rhetori with nets and tridents, secutors with swords and shields, thresses with curved swords and small shields each, designed to create visually interesting matchups and tactical variety. The crowd participates actively in determining the fate of defeated gladiators through a complex system of gestures, shouts, and mob psychology. A thumbs up might mean life, a thumbs down might mean death, or it might mean something completely different depending on which historian you believe, and how much wine the crowd has consumed. What's certain is that the emperor, when present, makes the final decision about whether a defeated gladiator lives or dies. This power over life and death demonstrates imperial authority, while providing the crowd with the illusion that their opinions matter in the grand scheme of imperial politics. All this violence, of course, requires medical attention, and Roman medicine is exactly what you'd expect from a civilization that believes fermented fish sauce is a health food, and sharing toilet sponges promotes community bonding. Roman physicians are a mixture of Greek immigrants who know something about anatomy, Roman citizens who know something about herbs, and charlatans who know something about separating sick people from their money. The quality of medical care you receive depends entirely on how much you can pay and whether your physician learned his trade from books, observation, or creative guesswork. Roman medical theory is based on the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, which must be kept in perfect balance for optimal health. When you're sick, it means your humors are unbalanced, and the solution is to rebalance them through bloodletting, purging, sweating, or other methods designed to remove whatever humor is in excess. Bloodletting is performed with bronze instruments. that remove blood from veins in quantities that would alarm modern medical professionals. Romans believed that releasing excess blood cures everything from headaches to plague, and physicians are remarkably enthusiastic about this treatment. The patient's survival is considered evidence that the treatment worked. The patient's death is considered evidence that the treatment was applied too late. Surgical procedures are performed without anesthesia beyond wine and herbal preparations that may or may not have any actual medicinal value. Roman surgeons can remove cataracts, perform amputations, and extract foreign objects from wounds. But they do so while the patient is fully conscious and able to appreciate every detail of the experience. The surgical instruments themselves are marvels of bronze and iron craftsmanship: scalpels, forceps, specula, and saws that would look familiar to modern surgeons if modern surgeons were accustomed to working with tools that haven't been sterilized, and patients who haven't been anesthetized. As the day progresses and the afternoon heat makes thinking difficult, you'll make your way back through the streets to your fourth-floor paradise, carrying whatever food you've managed to acquire, and whatever diseases you've picked up from the public facilities. The evening routine consists of eating whatever passes for dinner, engaging in whatever passes for entertainment, and going to sleep as soon as it gets dark, because oil for lamps is expensive and you need to save your money for more important things. Like not starving tomorrow, Roman life, you see, is a delicate balance between civilization and chaos, between the promise of imperial grandeur and the reality of daily survival, between the engineering marvels that supply your water and the social systems that ensure you share your toilet. Sponge with strangers who may or may not be carrying diseases that haven't been invented yet. But don't worry, tomorrow will bring new opportunities for excitement, education, and the sort of character-building experiences that make you grateful to be living in the greatest empire the world has ever known. As the sun begins its descent toward the 7 hills, and the heat of the Roman afternoon gives way to the slightly less oppressive heat of the Roman evening, you make your weary way back through the streets to your fourth-floor paradise. Your day of survival is nearly complete, but Roman life has a few more delightful surprises in store for you. The evening hours bring their own unique challenges, starting with the fundamental question of what passes for law and order in the greatest empire the world has ever known. Romans have developed an elaborate legal system that would be impressive if it weren't so thoroughly corrupted by money, politics, and the simple fact that justice is a luxury that only the wealthy can afford. Roman law, in theory, is a marvel of systematic thinking and legal precedent that will influence jurisprudence for millennia. In practice, it's a weapon wielded by the powerful against the powerless, a tool for extracting wealth from those who have it and redistributing it to those who already have more. The courts are where Roman citizens go to discover that their citizenship rights are directly proportional to the weight of their purse and the social standing of their patron. As a plebeian, your relationship with Roman law is simple. You're subject to it, but it's not necessarily subject to you. When you're accused of a crime and in Rome, everyone is eventually accused of something. Your fate depends less on your innocence or guilt than on your ability to navigate a system designed by aristocrats for the benefit of aristocrats. Bribery is so common in Roman courts that it's practically a professional expense. Judges, advocates, and court officials all have their prices, and these prices are well known and widely published, like market rates for grain or olive oil. Justice is a commodity to be purchased, and like all commodities in Rome, it's subject to supply and demand, inflation, and market manipulation. The wealthy don't just buy verdicts, they buy entire legal procedures. They can afford advocates who know which laws to cite, which precedents to invoke, and which officials to bribe. They can delay trials until their opponents run out of money, influence witnesses through gifts or threats, and ensure that any punishment they receive is more symbolic than substantial. Meanwhile, poor Romans face a legal system that operates on the principle that if you can't afford justice, you probably don't deserve it anyway. Public advocates are available for those who can't afford private ones, but these overworked officials have caseloads that would make modern public defenders weep with recognition and sympathy. Your legal troubles are compounded by the fact that Roman law makes numerous activities illegal that you might consider essential for survival. Gambling is illegal except during certain festivals, but Romans gamble constantly because life itself is already such a massive gamble that adding dice hardly changes the odds. Selling goods without proper permits is illegal. But permits cost money and require connections that most plebeians don't have. Speaking of gambling, Roman evenings are when the city's extensive illegal gambling industry comes alive. Every tavern, every papina, every back alley becomes a venue for games of chance that offer the tantalizing possibility of changing your circumstances through luck rather than merit. Romans have developed an impressive variety of ways to lose money they can't afford to lose. There are dice games, board games, animal fights, gladiator matches, chariot races, and betting on everything from the weather to the emperor's life expectancy. The house always wins, but Romans approach gambling with the same optimism they bring to politics the conviction that this time will be different. The taverns themselves deserve special mention as centers of Roman social life and vectors for disease transmission. These establishments serve wine that's been watered down to varying degrees depending on the honesty of the proprietor. Food that may or may not have been fresh when it was prepared, an entertainment that ranges from musicians and storytellers to fights between drunk customers over dice games. Roman tavern cuisine consists of whatever can be prepared quickly and sold cheaply. Bread, cheese, olives, sausages of mysterious origin, and stews that have been simmering so long that the original ingredients have achieved a kind of immortality through continuous cooking. The wine is often mixed with honey, spices, or whatever else might mask the taste of vinegar and regret. Taverns also serve as informal employment centers where day laborers gather to find work, information exchanges where news and gossip flow. Like wine, and social clubs where Romans can temporarily forget about their circumstances while creating new problems to worry about tomorrow. The entertainment in these establishments reflects Roman tastes: loud, violent, and potentially profitable. If you're lucky enough to bet on the right outcome, musicians perform songs that celebrate famous gladiators, military victories, and sexual adventures that would make modern audiences blush. Storytellers recount myths, legends, and contemporary scandals with equal enthusiasm and creative embellishment. But your evening entertainment options are limited by the same economic realities that govern everything else in your life. Oil for lamps is expensive, so most Romans go to sleep when it gets dark and wake up when it gets light, like sensible people who can't afford to burn money for illumination. This brings us to the most fundamental aspect of Roman life: the family, structure that governs your domestic existence and determines your status within the larger social hierarchy. Roman families operate according to principles that would make modern family counselors, rich and modern social workers, very busy. The Roman household is ruled by the paterfamilias, the male head of the family who possesses absolute authority over everyone and everything within his domain. This authority includes the power of life and death over his children, complete control over family finances, and the right to arrange marriages, business deals, and funeral preparations according to his whims and financial interests. Roman women, regardless of their social class, live under the legal authority of their fathers until they marry, at which point they live under the legal authority of their husbands. They can't own property, conduct business transactions, or make legal decisions without male oversight. Wealthy women can sometimes circumvent these restrictions through creative legal arrangements and family connections, but poor women have no such options. Domestic violence is not only legal in Roman households, but often considered necessary for proper family management. The paterfamilias is expected to maintain discipline through physical punishment, and this expectation extends to wives, children, and slaves. Roman moral philosophy actually criticizes men who fail to beat their family members when discipline is required, considering such restraint a sign of weakness that undermines social order. Children in Roman families are property until they reach adulthood, assuming they survive that long. Infant mortality is high due to disease, poor nutrition, and the Roman practice of infanticide, the deliberate killing of unwanted newborns, particularly girls, disabled children, and children born during financially difficult times. Those children who survive infancy face childhoods that combine education, labor, and preparation for their predetermined social roles. Wealthy children learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and the social skills necessary for managing property and people. Poor children learn whatever trades their parents practice and hope to develop marketable skills before economic circumstances force them into slavery or military service. Roman child-rearing philosophy emphasizes obedience, respect for authority, and acceptance of one's place in the social hierarchy. Children who question these principles face physical punishment designed to correct their thinking and remind them that curiosity is a privilege of the wealthy. Religion permeates every aspect of Roman life, providing both spiritual comfort and social control through an elaborate system of rituals, superstitions, and divine threats. Roman religious practice operates on the principle of quid pro quo. You give the gods what they want, and they give you what you want, assuming they're in the mood and you've calculated the exchange rate correctly. Your household contains a shrine dedicated to the household gods who protect your family and property. These lares and pinities require daily attention through prayers, offerings, and rituals that ensure their continued benevolence. Neglecting these obligations brings misfortune, disease, and divine punishment that affects not just you, but your entire family lineage. Roman religious calendar includes numerous festivals, sacrificial ceremonies, and public rituals that citizens are expected to attend and participate in enthusiastically. Missing these events suggests disloyalty to the state and its gods, which can have legal and social consequences that extend far beyond religious disapproval. The gods themselves are capricious entities who require constant placation through increasingly elaborate and expensive offerings. When things go well, Romans credit the gods' favor. When things go badly, Romans assume they've somehow offended the gods and need to make additional sacrifices to restore divine goodwill. But perhaps the most omnipresent source of anxiety in Roman life is the political instability that makes every day feel like it might be your last, because it very well might be. The Roman Empire operates according to political principles that combine absolute power with the constant threat of violent overthrow, creating a system where emperors rule through fear while living in terror of assassination. During the past century alone, roughly 20% of Roman emperors have been assassinated, often by their own guards, family members, or trusted advisors. Political violence isn't an aberration in Roman governance, it's a feature, a mechanism for changing leadership when legal succession becomes inconvenient or impossible. These political upheavals affect ordinary citizens in ways that range from inconvenient to fatal. New emperors often mean new taxes, new laws, new wars, and new opportunities for settling old scores. Political enemies disappear, property gets confiscated, and families find themselves suddenly elevated or destroyed based on their connections to the previous regime. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguards, have become powerful enough to make and unmake emperors according to their own interests and financial incentives. They've literally auctioned off the imperial throne to the highest bidder, turning the governance of the empire into a commercial transaction with predictably chaotic results. Romans live with the constant awareness that their political loyalty is being evaluated by people who have the power to destroy them. Expressing the wrong opinion, associating with the wrong people, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time can result in exile, execution, or worse, being forced to commit suicide as a gesture of respect for imperial authority. This political paranoia extends throughout Roman society, affecting everything from business relationships to social gatherings to family conversations. Romans have learned to speak carefully, associate cautiously, and always maintain plausible deniability when discussing anything more controversial than the weather. Social mobility in this environment requires careful navigation of relationships that determine access to opportunities, protection, and basic survival. As a plebeian, your advancement depends on finding powerful patrons who will provide legal protection, business opportunities, and social connections in exchange for political support, personal services, and absolute loyalty. These relationships operate according to unwritten rules that govern everything, from how you dress for morning visits to how you vote in elections to how you conduct yourself in public. Violating these expectations means losing patronage, which often means losing your livelihood and social standing. The patron-client system creates a complex network of obligations, favors, and mutual dependencies that bind Roman society together, while ensuring that real power remains concentrated among the wealthy elite. Clients compete with each other for their patrons' attention and favor, creating horizontal conflicts that prevent them from organizing against the vertical hierarchy that oppresses them all. Successful social climbing requires not just hard work and talent, but also political cunning, social intelligence, and the ability to anticipate which way the political winds are blowing. Romans who rise too quickly or become too prominent risk attracting attention from people who prefer the status quo and have the power to enforce their preferences violently. As you finally settle into your straw mattress in your fourth-floor apartment, surrounded by the sounds of 40 families engaging in their evening routines of eating, arguing, praying, and preparing for tomorrow's survival challenges, you might reflect on the remarkable achievement that is Roman civilization. Rome has created an empire that spans 3 continents, built cities that house millions of people, developed legal systems that will influence human society for millennia, and established cultural traditions that define what it means to be civilized. Romans have conquered barbarous tribes, tamed wilderness frontiers, and brought the benefits of imperial governance to peoples who previously lived in ignorance of proper sewage management and professional entertainment. Yet for all its grandeur and accomplishment, Roman civilization rests on foundations of human suffering that would shock modern sensibilities if they weren't so thoroughly normalized by familiarity and necessity. Slavery, violence, inequality, and oppression aren't flaws in the Roman system, they're features, essential components of the social machinery that makes imperial greatness possible. Your daily life as a Roman plebeian consists of navigating these contradictions while trying to survive long enough to reproduce, possibly improve your circumstances, and hopefully die of old age rather than disease, violence, or architectural failure. You live in the greatest city ever built, surrounded by marvels of engineering and architecture. Yet you share toilet sponges with strangers and hope your building doesn't collapse before morning. You're a citizen of an empire that has brought peace, prosperity, and civilization to millions of people. Yet you face daily threats from hunger, disease, crime, political violence, and the constant possibility that someone more powerful than you will decide you're inconvenient. You participate in a culture that has produced magnificent art, literature, philosophy, and law, yet your own life is governed by superstition, prejudice, and the arbitrary whims of people who consider you slightly more valuable than livestock. This is the brutal truth about life in ancient Rome. It's simultaneously magnificent and horrible, civilized and barbarous, inspiring and appalling. Romans have created something unprecedented in human history, a vast, complex, sophisticated society that provides security, prosperity, and cultural achievement to millions of people, while systematically destroying the lives of millions of others. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities for excitement, education, and character-building experiences. You'll wake up before dawn, navigate the obstacle course that Romans call streets, work whatever job you can find, eat whatever food you can afford, socialize with whoever won't rob you, pray to whatever gods might be listening, and go to sleep, hoping that tomorrow will be better than today. And who knows, maybe it will be. Romans are optimistic people, despite everything they've experienced and everything they know about the world. They believe in the possibility of improvement, advancement, and the chance that fortune might smile on them. They have to believe this, because the alternative is accepting that this is as good as it gets. So sleep well in your fourth-floor paradise, citizen of Rome. Dream of gladiator victories, successful business ventures, and social advancement. Dream of a future where your children might live on the third floor, or even the second. Dream of an empire that lasts forever, and a civilization that brings peace and prosperity to all humanity. And remember to like and subscribe, or the gods will ensure that tomorrow brings news of another imperial assassination, a fresh outbreak of plague, and a rent increase that forces you to move to the 5th floor. Assuming the building has one and it hasn't burned down yet, because this is Rome, eternal city, Caput Mundi, the greatest achievement in human history. And you get to live in it, survive in it, and call it home until it kills you. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the brutal realities of daily life in ancient Rome. While we've painted a rather dark picture, it's important to remember that Rome's achievements in law, engineering, architecture, and governance genuinely did advance human civilization in ways that still benefit us today. The Romans were complex people living in complex times, creating beauty and horror in equal measure, much like people in every era, including our own sweet dreams. And may your own era's contradictions be slightly less likely to involve communal toilet sponges.